Hello, everyone. I'm so glad you could be with us today. I'm here to talk to you about analytics and what you do with them. And it's quantitative analytics. And I'm Alice Black. I actually have a PhD in program evaluation as one of my focuses. So I'm glad to share with you a subject that many people just can't stand. They don't like the having to do statistics, having to do analytics, having to look at those things, but it can make what you do better as a communicator. It really helps strengthen your program or even know when to let something go. So let's get right to it today. And I'm going to share my screen. And here it is. It tells you about me and what this is for, which is your Strategic Communications Certificate. So it's really important to learn about these things. So first of all, what is quantitative? Basically, what it is looking at data and looking at numbers. Now, I'm not a big numbers person, even though I deal with them all the time, but it's a puzzle. They're puzzle pieces that help you to know what you are doing and where you're going, and they'll help you put together a roadmap of those things. So look at it as a roadmap and as a puzzle. So first of all, as I mentioned, it's research, that's numerical. You're measuring something, you're seeing how you're doing, you're seeing where you are on the road and where you want to go and how the things you are doing are helping you to get there. They provide feedback to you. They provide feedback from your audiences, from your stakeholders, maybe from other people you're working with. So that's very important to know. You use surveys or questionnaires, things you count with, web analytics, other data you've already collected, records, your database, anything that identifies patterns and trends and can lead to you counting those numbers, the quantifiers. You also want to generate enough responses in whatever you're doing to make a generalized statement of fact. Now, ethically, you don't make assumptions without the numbers supporting you. So you want to make a generalized statement of fact based upon the numbers that you are seeing. So we use analytics and evaluation, especially in public relations and communications evaluation, to empower. We look at it to judge effectiveness and measure outcomes. We may have accreditations that we have to deal with, especially if you're in education. You may have to determine or establish a value or support a value for something. You're going to satisfy your funders' criteria, especially if you have grants. Grants rely a lot on analytics. You're going to look at implementation and what that means and what the numbers are telling you there. You're going to look at it, and I can't say this enough, to improve or to evaluate a new initiative or model, or determine the public perception of how they are looking themselves and evaluating what you are doing. Identifying the contributions of a program and making decisions about the future of a program or something else you might be doing, whether it's a publication, a program, an online, social media, whatever. So those things are used interchangeably here. So you're going to measure your communication outcomes, not just your outputs. And when we look at these things, when we're measuring them, we're thinking about reputation, comprehension. Are there any behaviors we wanted to elicit in these? What's the engagement of our audiences? Were they engaged with us? Did they do something because we wanted to do? Was there a shift in attitude? Maybe we wanted a shift in attitude, especially dealing with certain justice issues. Maybe there's an awareness we are creating. Also, maybe we've gotten a donation, or maybe they followed us or signed up for something that we have wanted them to sign up for. So those are all ways to measure your outcomes. So evaluation and measurement in the quantitative realm, and also qualitative, but we'll talk about the quantitative first. Qualitative is the next part of this presentation next week. We're going to look at informed decision making. It shows us what's working and what's not working. It helps to identify our paths. It's important because we're looking at our efforts. You don't want to put time and money and everything into a path that you don't want to be on. Maybe there's another effort that you should undertake. And I can't emphasize enough about the habit of letting go. If you don't see the numbers, if you're not seeing your evaluation outcomes, if you're not seeing the results you want to get, please let it go. Try something new, or try something different with it. What evaluations can do? They're going to identify the strengths. They're going to highlight the good, what's good about whatever you're doing. They're going to expose the faults and weaknesses, which are really important to look at. They're going to enlighten, and they're going to improve practices and decisions. I'd like you to look at evaluations and looking at these kind of measures as it's not a personal implication of what you are doing or how you are or your worth. It's whatever it is that that particular program is doing, or that print publication, or that radio piece, or that podcast, or that web based whatever you're offering, or your websites. It's so don't take it personally towards yourself. This is just helping you highlight and to grow whatever program you're working in. So that's really important to keep that separated. Don't take it as a personal problem that you have. It's just a puzzle to be solved to make everything better that you're working on. What evaluations cannot do, and I've seen these in action, and it's not a magic wand. It's not going to correct malfunctions and inadequacies. It'll help point out the weaknesses, but it's not going to correct those. It's not a solution to be proposed every time there's a problem. It does not give all of the answers. That's for you and for leadership and for others in your organization to look at those things and look at perhaps what the solutions could be based upon the data. So many times evaluations are used wrongly, or we're going to do an evaluation for everything. Pick what you want to do an evaluation for. It takes time to do these things. So start small. Take some baby steps, then perhaps you can take larger steps. So here's some data to measure, and I want to talk about this because when I went to journalism school and in public relations, we discussed this a lot, and it's not so much discussed anymore, and I don't want to emphasize it a lot, but I want to point this out to you. We used to count media clippings or general impressions, and if you send out a press release today, you may get a general, if it's through a kind of a social whatever, they may give you an aggregation of general impressions. Really, those aren't measured much anymore. And not just advertising values equivalencies. The other thing we did when I was starting out was this PR piece or this media release that we put out, and it made this publication, it would have been this much money if we would have bought an advertising for it. Back then, that really sounded good. A lot of us were investing in advertising, and we didn't have the kind of funds, especially in the nonprofit world and the religious world, to be able to do that. So we're leaving those behind too. What you instead want to look at is, who are your stakeholders? Who are your audiences? Are you reaching them? Is your message positive, negative? How does it measure up? We are taught to write on the 6th grade reading level. Are you meeting those levels for today's audience? Are they short bites, or are they very long that people don't want to read them? Are the desired key messages communicated? What is the message when you're planning that you want to communicate? Are you getting those across? How long are your videos viewed? Not just the clicks, but how long do people stay with them? All of these are web analytics that you can look at, and you can get. Google Analytics is great about that. YouTube Analytics, all of those things. How many shares or comments are you getting on your social media? Not just the numbers of likes, but how are you engaging your followers on social media? How did you track your sales? If maybe you're selling something, maybe you have t-shirts. How are you tracking your donations? Are there event signups? Are there other kind of signups, maybe for emails, etc.? So how are people learning about you, and what are they showing for that? And here's questions from your quantitative analysis and analytics that you should look at. Did you meet your goals and objectives? What should we change? Who should we report this data to? Is it our leadership team? Is it someone else within the organization? Maybe it's a ministry leader. Who are we reporting to the data? And remember, you're reporting both the good and the bad. You don't weed it out. That's not an ethical solution to anything. You want to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly, and take a look at it and say, hey, we did this right, or this isn't working right for our audiences. We've got to change. Should we continue with a phase 2? That maybe there's a phase 2 to your project and you want to look at continuing with it. Maybe you don't want to continue to the following year. When should you launch this? What's the best time of year, day, whatever to launch? There's a lot of different schools of thought and research about when to send out emails, when to post on social media, how many times a week you need to post on social media, or even a day in some cases. So how are you meeting that research that's already out there? And what is your generalized statement of fact? What are you really trying to get to with what you were doing? So analytics starts with your database. Some people keep that database on spreadsheets. Some have different kinds of software that they use with their database. So whatever it is, look at that and determine who are your populations. Are they donors, volunteers, friends, sisters, family of the sisters, or others? Who are they? Maybe they're all of the above. Maybe for the particular piece of communications or public relations you're going to be doing, it's one segment of the audience. Think about segmenting your audiences based upon what you are doing. How much have they given to you, or what do they attend? That's another way to segment and look at your database. Looking to see, we have this aggregation of data. It's quantified, it's numbers, but how do we then break it out so it's easy and it's manageable to use and it's easy to track? So you're using your database basically for market research. And you're evaluating and testing your communication strategies. So that's really important to do and to look at, and to get into that mindset to start thinking about how you can do that. So we talked about segmenting your data. Here's a little bit more in-depth look at how you could do that. Maybe your population in your database likes certain things. Maybe it's spirituality, and you know that because they've asked for prayers, or they've come to a retreat, or they have attended some other event or function, or you just know that, so you've logged that in the database, or they belong to a particular ministry that deals in that area, so, and you know that, or they've given to that area, and so that's how you know it. Maybe they're interested in social justice. We know a lot of the younger audiences are very interested in social justice areas. Your retreat centers, your retreat areas, your vocations. Maybe they're interested in retired sisters, healthcare, any education, any of those areas. Look at how you could potentially segment your data and the numbers you're looking at in that data. Maybe they're first-time donors. Maybe they're first-time friends. Maybe they're people that have been with you forever. And that's a whole other conversation that you could have about those that have been with you a long time. Maybe that you've segmented according to donors over $1,000 or $50, or they are just given for the first time this year, or whatever it is. And those who attend, subscribe, they give, they've responded to a specific strategy, such as your direct mail, such as your social media, your website, maybe they bought a raffle ticket, whatever it is. How do you want, for whatever you're looking for with your communications or public relations plan, how would you segment that audience? Now, there are times that you will look at your full database. You will mail to that full database, and that's a whole thing that you want to continue with them. And that maybe there's other times where you'd like to segment to see how you do. Maybe you want to test something. Maybe you want to model. You have to think about what your outcomes are that you're expecting. Once again, if you're just doing general public relations, general communications, just, hey, getting to know us, maybe that's your full database. Maybe if you're just targeting a specific project or a donation or prayers or social justice issue, maybe that's a different part of your database. So you want to look at that. And most of us have more mailing addresses than we do emails. That's just how it is. People get a lot of emails. They're more opt out of things. They still do like to get mail. The research is showing that people like to get mail. You don't overwhelm them with mail, but they do like to get mail. So we're going to determine what to measure. As I mentioned, what's your desired impact and your sustainability for whatever it is you're doing? How do you want it to be sustainable? Do you want it to be sustainable? Maybe it's a one-time thing that you're doing. Maybe it's an open house. Maybe it's something else, an anniversary, 25th, 50th, 100th anniversary, whatever that is. So you're going to look at some of these areas. You're going to look at count, how many you want to reach or how many units you're going to distribute. That could be your mailings, etc., or your social media messages, whatever it is you're going to do. You're going to gather your demographics. That's the database we just talked about. You're going to review your online metrics. So what do your opens look like? What do your website analytics look like? How about your click-through rates, your social media channel analytics? Maybe you're trying to get new people through social media. You can buy advertising. We all know that. We can target it very specifically for certain demographics. Maybe that's a new entry into your database. Maybe that's something you want to focus upon. You want to conduct a media analysis, like what media have you gotten? What are your press clippings? What do your analytics look like there? What are your social media posts? Which ones are getting bigger shares than others? So what is it? Where are you getting that rise in the curve? So it's going to go up and it's going to go down. So where's that rise in the curve? Determine your retention rates. Are you keeping people or are you losing them in droves? Or maybe they're not interested in a certain thing. Then that's really great where segmentation comes along. Do not feel you have to communicate to somebody that may not be interested. Maybe there's certain people that only want something from you once a year and they've told you that. Maybe there's certain people who like everything that you do and everything that you get. Check your levels moved or your adopted rates. So are you moving people a level? Are they moving to other places in social media that they'd like to see? Are they clicking on videos and watching them? Are they giving you more money? Are they coming to more events? Are they signing up for other things you're offering because they're very interested in what you're doing? And then look at your return on investment. And we'll get into that in a second about return on investment and how that works. We've all heard about this, SMART goals. It's all over the place now. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. Most of you should have some kind of plan that you're following, whether it's goals, objectives, strategies, tactics, whatever it is that you're looking at and how you're following those things. They're important to any kind of a plan, a department. Even if you're a lone person out there, it's great to have some kind of a roadmap on what you want to follow. Will that change sometimes throughout the year? Yes. Things come up, things happen we don't know about. Some things get dropped by the wayside. There's reasons we didn't do it. Just be aware of those. At the end of the year, evaluate that plan. Say, we did this, we didn't do that. This is why. Maybe there's things in the plan that you no longer need. You can drop those. Don't try to take on too much all at one time, though. Space it out. That's the reasons for the strategies, and especially the tactics on your timelines, on what you're going to do, when you're going to do it. Maybe you have a chapter coming up. That's going to take more time than something else. Maybe those things are going to have to be left aside for a little bit. So your objectives are your broad outcomes that are being sought. For example, you're going to retain 60% or more of the first-time donors in the fiscal year following their first gift. That's important. I know a lot of you don't focus particularly on this kind of donations, but it's a strategy you could look at. You could work with your development people on as well. So strategies, they're general statements to describe what must be done. So looking at that first thing about first-time donors, educate your first-time donors on how their money was used. Folks like you and like what sisters do because they help people. They can stretch a dollar better than anybody. And so how are you telling those stories about what's going on in your congregation? How are you lifting those up so other people are aware? It's all about storytelling and testimonials of other people that have been helped. And a nice way to measure that is because people give. That's a quick measure in your database. That's why I'm using it today. And your tactic, how do you accomplish these things that you're thinking about? What's the timeline? What's the cost? What's the staff that's going to be assigned to it? So for example, we're going to send those first-time donors a quarterly print or e-news. We're going to invite them maybe for a tour or an event. We're going to show them the impact of what they've given for, and we're going to engage them perhaps even in a program. I'm using donations because it's an easy thing to track in a database. And it's a simple technique that I utilize to show you how quantitative evaluation works. So what does your plan look like? For example, maybe you want to increase your social media followers on Facebook to 5,000 and engage by 10% by July 1st of 2024. And maybe you're going to offer them a free gift card for those who like and share. That's everything jammed into one little piece here. But it maybe is something you want to post and see how you're doing throughout the year and touch base with it. So, do we have all of our ducks in a row? No. There's always that duck that's out of line. That's what I want to point out here. Do not feel like you have failed in any way if those ducks get out of line. Look at it as, hey, wow, this is a chance to see what worked and what didn't work. And to change, to always be ready to change. Always be ready to adopt too. Maybe there's something you haven't thought of that somebody else is doing really well and you can adopt it. So we're going to look at these areas when we get into our communications plan, our PR plans. Was this a terrible idea? This is what our data is going to show us. Or were we actually brilliant geniuses? Sometimes we are. Sometimes we're those brilliant geniuses. We didn't mean to be, but wow, did we do well with this, and we're going to continue to do it for a while. So let's look at direct mail and return on investments, because this is another good example we can utilize. I told you that direct mail is not going out of style. It's something we still think we should be doing, even though postage rates are going up. That's going to be part of the tools in our toolbox. We have this toolbox. It deals with a lot of things. It deals with our web analytics and our online presences, etc. But we also have direct mail and phone calls even. But it's harder to get through to people nowadays as well. They all let it go to voicemail if they don't know who it is. So let's say our goal is to help a ministry raise money to do X. Now, this is a real life example I'm going to show you on what we have done in our shop here and how we've put this into action, just so you know. And then the objective is to achieve a response rate that exceeds the investment that we're making. That's in postage and printing. And the goal for the funds that we have that we want to raise for this ministry is $18,000. Now, our strategy is to send a letter for this appeal. We're going to use the tactic of sending the letter at the nonprofit rate because postage rates have gone up so high. We want to save some money, so we're using our nonprofit mailing certificate. We're going to have it personalized. We're going to personalize that letter to the people because we also know that works. And we're going to actually do something a little different that we've never done. We're going to test this strategy and this tactic, and we're going to see if we know that maybe they can give this much, and we're going to ask each individual for how much we feel they can give towards this particular ministry and this particular project. And we're using our analytical data, our quantified data to do that. And then we're going to follow up with emails to push them a little further. Now, we don't have a budget for this. This is something new that we just found out about that we have to work with. It's not on our timeline, but we're thinking and talking about it because we have a few months to work on this that we'll mail it in. This was this past February of 2023. And we've segmented our audience based upon who we have in our database that we know are interested in that ministry, have attended an event at that ministry, we have their maybe email from that ministry because they're interested in following them. Whatever it is, however we got that data, we know it's related to that particular ministry. So let's look at what we're doing here. and this is a real life example, and I apologize if it's too many numbers. They're hard for me to deal with too sometimes. These are called return on investments. So the quantity we ended up mailing were 897 letters. The cost of printing and postage, that's the nonprofit rate, $1,621. Now that did not include our internal staff time, because our staff, all of our jobs as staff is to work for the congregation and the various ministries. So that's included. If that is just something on the outside, if I wanted to take it even further and break it down, I'd have to break it down very minutely. And frankly, for this particular example, I didn't think we needed to do that, because most of the time we don't charge our internal staff time to our ministries. However, if we would have hired somebody outside, or a graphic designer, or anybody else to do some kind of work, or a photographer or whatever, that would have to be included in my cost of printing and postage. So the number of responses we received from mailing 897 letters was 68. We may also track that if we do another kind of a mailing, whether it's through a publication or whatever, we'd put an envelope in the mailing, and that's how we track that. The envelope would be returned to us. Now, there was an envelope in this mailing as well to be returned to us, or they could also give online, and we could track it that way. Our total donations we received were $20,885. Our total revenue from the mailing, that's the net income, and you get that by subtracting your cost of postage and printing by the donations you've received. So that's $19,264. So the number of responses over the quantity mailed times 100, we had an 8% conversion rate. And what that means is they did something. And many in marketing, you'll hear them talking about we made a sale or we did whatever. In this case, we're tracking a donation as our conversion rate. So that's how communications and development work together, because we're looking at our conversion rate on some of the things that we're doing, and it's easy to track because you're getting some great analytics from that. So that's how I show you the math there of how I got the 8%. The average gift we received, which is that total of donations out of the 68, would be $307. That's pretty good, $307 per person that gave. Our ROI, which is our net income over our total investment times 100, was 1,188%, which I was shocked by. I thought I did the math wrong. I had somebody else also do the math. So if you find a mistake in my math, let me know. But so 1,000 times the return on investment's pretty darn good. So our total cost per unit mailed or thing printed or whatever you want to look at, it was $1.80. It cost us actually per response $23.84. But remember, each of those respondents came up to an average of 307. So you take $23 away from that and you're at the 200 and some level. That's pretty good. And so that's what you want to look at. What is this telling me? What are my numbers telling me? First of all, this looked like a pretty good thing to do. That's the first assumption you can make based upon the data, because you're making assumptions based upon your data. That our responses were pretty good. 8% conversion rate's not bad, and the respondents aren't bad. And I'll tell you how I know that. Direct mail statistics. So my direct mail statistics, because there's a lot of people that do this research for you. You don't have to. You can just Google it. Direct mail continues to be one of the leading marketing channels because we're marketing. We're telling a story. The direct mail conversion rate is 5.3. That's those who make a purchase. In this case, it's those who made a donation. Ours was 8%. So we did pretty well. We beat that conversion rate. So just looking at numbers, we can say we did pretty well here. So other data to evaluate. I'm going to look at who responded. Were these folks just interested for the first time in this ministry? Had been longtime followers of the ministry? On just those who responded to us. Have they given before? Were they, how did they know about us? What intrigued them about this? You know, did they give after the letter came to them? Did they give after the email came to them? Maybe they're on the advisory council and they gave after an advisory council board meeting or others. Once again, donations are easy to use for analytics. That's why I'm using it now for this particular example. But it'll get you thinking, it'll get your wheels turning on what else you could use. Maybe it's a prayer request that you're receiving. Maybe it's someone that's contacted you after they saw one of your publications or on the web. They're sending you an online form of some sort. They're coming to an event because they saw you. Don't get stuck just in this kind of analytics using donations. Think of how else you can apply it, how you can become creative to do it. You're all creative folks, and so you can think of your own examples of how you'd like to apply these. Who should evaluate these numbers? Well, it's okay to let your staff do it, but I also want to say if it's a big evaluation, and what you want to look at is your internal evaluator, like a staff person like me, I could perform that evaluation, but I could be perceived as lacking objectivity and credibility, especially if I'm related to the department. You know, you hear a lot about, we tried that. We already tried that. We're not going to do that. So you have to be objective, and you have to be ethical, and you have to think of truth and look at those numbers and keep them as the numbers and just say what the numbers are showing, nothing else. You know, no matter how close you are to a project, maybe it's your pet project, maybe the numbers aren't there. Be willing to let it go. Don't be hung up on that. Internal evaluators, especially if it's a big project, also need to be shielded from consequences and negativity that painful truths could cause. Sometimes it's not likely what we like to hear with the data. It doesn't lead us down those roads, and those can be painful truths. And if it's one of those areas that's been around a long time, and a lot of people internally love it, but the external audiences that you're trying to reach don't love it, and you have to make a decision to let it go. Stick with the numbers. They can be painful, but the numbers will show you. And you need enough numbers too. You need enough numbers, as we mentioned earlier on the first couple of slides, to make that informed decision. You need enough respondents, and there's a lot of work out there about how many you need. If you're mailing to this many, how many people make a very good response rate. It's not as high as you think, believe it or not. Also, if you ever need an external evaluator, they can be used because they ensure objectivity and can bring an external perspective to a program. Those are good to engage, and I have engaged them on some programs, especially if they're larger programs you have a lot of money invested in and need to look at it objectively, and to bring an outside evaluator in for those things. So we're going to talk about mixed methods, and you're having two of these areas. We're talking about quantitative, then we're going to be talking about qualitative next time, and that's called mixed methods, when qualitative and quantitative meet. And mixed methods research is very big right now because you're looking at both of those areas you're measuring and bringing them together and looking at where that data triangulates, where the points are, what it's showing you, what it's revealing to you. The strength is because they do converge, you can see where they converge, and your qualitative and your quantitative data are going to show you the same things. Your numbers are going to show you a very clear path, though, just by for example, the one I just showed you, that example. So it's very important. So we're going to meet again. We're going to talk about what we've just discovered today. I want you to think about a few things before we meet and have some questions, or have some of this data for yourselves if you could. Identify something you believe would be appropriate to evaluate that you work with, or that's in your area, or maybe it's at a ministry that you work with. How are you going to measure your success? How will you measure the success for those things? How will you know when to let go? What's the data going to tell you so you know when to let go? Now, it may not be based upon donations. This could be a general kind of communication you're doing, and you need to continue it. It's important to keep yourself out there in the general public. So it may not be donations that you use to measure these things. How are you going to know when to let go if you have to? How are you going to know when it's a success? What are your goals, objectives, strategies, and tactics? Do one really quick. just bring an example of what you feel will help you with that program or to communicate further. So let's look at these sources. They're all over the web. You can check them too, but I'm giving you the links. Direct mail statistics from 2023. There's a report out there. I do a lot because you're still nonprofits with nonprofit management, and I use statistics for people who think they hate statistics. And I also use Achieving Excellence in Fundraising. It's a book I use a lot. It also talks about communications and public relations in there. And I use program evaluation as well. So all of these areas really help you, all of these sources. You may use others, but these are good ones. The other thing I want to point out to you are the Barcelona principles from the International Association for the Measurement and Evaluations of Communications. The link is here, 3.0 is out now, and it talks about effective public relations and communications measurement and how to measure those things and what to look for. They're very nice steps that are easily followed, and you can look at them. Like, you don't have to follow all of the steps. You never do with any of these programs. What works for you may not work for somebody else, and what works for me may not work for you. So that's why you need to invent your own wheel. Invent the way you're going to be doing things. And I'm so happy to have been with you today to talk about a difficult subject that many of you, I know, do not like to look at, or do you even have time to deal with it, because it does take time. That's why I start small. Cut off the little small chunks first. Look at something that is easily, the data's there. You can easily utilize your data for. And then think about in the future too about what you need to gather data for as well, so you can evaluate your programs and evaluate what you are doing. And so that's it for today. And thank you for being here with me. I look forward to talking to you. Bye now.
Week due to vacation. Hey everyone, welcome back to your Strategic Communication Certificate live session. We have, I think, most of the folks on. We've got quite a few folks who are out this week due to vacations and congregational chaos. So we will, I'll get us started right away. We have Alice Black with us today. Hopefully you all had a chance to watch the quantitative analytics video prior to coming on today. Alice is the Director of Communications and Mission Advancement at the Dominican Sisters of Peace. And I'm going to hand it right over to her. As a reminder, watch the chat or pop some questions into the chat especially if your microphone is giving you trouble. And feel free to converse with her. It doesn't have to be super formal. So Alice, I'm going to let you take it away for general responses.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. At least this afternoon here. Good to see all of you. I hope I covered what you were looking for in terms of quantitative analytics. And I was reminded you're all going to be doing a strategic communications plan as part of your end of time of this group here. So you can definitely use some of this in your plan, because as we talked about in the video, how do you know your audience? How are you finding that data about who your audience is? And that's all part of a good strategic communications plan. But I did leave you a few thoughts last time. I'm going to share my screen just so you can see those again. And to get this conversation started, and it's thinking here, can you, maybe it's not, let me try this again. I have too many windows open at once. I'm one of those people that do all these windows at once. It doesn't like me doing that. Hang on a minute.
Okay.
So it's going to kick back on me. Alrighty. So here's some things we gave you to ponder. Identify something you believe to be appropriate to evaluate. How will you measure your success? How will you know when to let go? And what are your goals, objectives, strategies, and tactics? If you picked one or whatever, but you're going to have all those in your strategic communications plan. So those are some of the things we just left you as a thought process when we meet again here. So does anybody want to take it away and ask questions or share some thoughts they may have had when they were thinking about these things, or any troubles you may have run into?
Well, I wanted to thank you, Alice. I thought there was a lot of really good material in here. And like you said, you're not a numbers person, and I'm not either. So you made it pretty painless to get through it. But did you want us to share, since it's such a small group today, did you want us to share what we had written down?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay. So we have associates, I think, like probably everyone else does. We have associates, and they're larger now in number than our sisters, who are getting very small in number. And I'm with the Ursuline Sisters of Louisville, so we have a Facebook page for the sisters that does very well. We have really good engagement, and I think close to like 4,000 followers, which is great. The Associates Facebook page, which I started a few years ago, only has 214 followers. So the engagement is not what we would like to see. And it's also kind of been one of those things where I did it when I could get to it, kind of thing. It was on the bottom of the list. So I have a part-time staff member who I've tasked with that page, but we still haven't really seen any growth. And so one of the things I would like to do, obviously, is increase followers. My goal objective would be promote the associates and increase membership for that group. And what was S? Increase awareness among certain segments. And so my thought was, and maybe you could steer me in the right direction, but I was thinking maybe of surveying the current associates on what they would like to see on their social media page.
The nice thing about associates, it's a captive audience. You can survey them. You have a nice demographic there to do that with. And that is something you could start with, is to encourage them to be on your Facebook page or to follow you on social media, and then to start sharing. One of the other things I've heard that's a good accomplishment for some other people, they've also had other associates become the administrators of that page. Like they're the main administrator, but other associates become the administrator, and they can help drive that traffic for you as well. So it's all getting the word out with the associates, and then following those demographics and seeing, and you can even send out reminders. Hey, go to our Facebook page. There's some great posts today, or this week, or so that's great. Associates is a great audience because it is an audience you can collect a lot of statistics with and demographics and figure out what's working and what's not. It's a good test audience for you. So that's great, Kathy, that you're picking that as one of your objectives and your goals.
Yeah. I guess low-hanging fruit, right?
Yes, that's right. Start with those. Then you can also use them as a test audience. So you can see sometimes what works and what doesn't. Now, it may not be the age demographic you want sometimes, so I don't know what your associate age demographics look like, But if you're, for example, if you're trying to look at young people, I don't know if they're all young or whatever. So those may be different segments of that audience, but at least it's a good test audience too for you.
Yeah, it's almost like we have two groups. We have associates that are elderly, honestly, and then we have younger ones that have recently joined. So we almost have two groups of associates that we're trying to
segment that group even further. And we're talking about focus groups next time, so that's a good segmentation also. There's some pluses and minuses to that, which you'll see, but yes, that's great to have those groups. Anyone else want to share? What are you thinking about? Because you're all writing this plan now, right? You all got your plans, your goals and objectives going on for your communications.
I know when Dusty mentioned that last time, I really panicked. I was like, what? I must have missed the first announcement, so I've been working on it.
Sorry for the chaos and panic. Don't worry, we're not the only one who was surprised.
It's like, like when you go to class, you're writing the paper at the last minute the night before, right? So.
You can go ahead, Donna.
Okay. So for me, I just wanted to say I really appreciated it. As someone who likes to look at the data to see if we have trends on the right track, but sometimes I don't know if we're really on the right track. Data is such an interesting thing, and it's sort of like, okay, well, is growing our followers by X amount per month, is that good? I mean, at least it's going up. I mean, so it's still, I feel a little vacuous, our team does, to say, okay, well, if we're growing by 5 or 10 followers a month on Facebook, should we be shooting for more? I mean, and my tendency is to always say shoot for more. But the thing that's been helpful as I've gone through our plan is, between that and one of the first lessons we had, is really making those smart goals. And so where I had things like increased traffic for the congregational website, now I'm being a little bit more specific about increasing it by this much over the next so many months. And at least that's giving us something to shoot for. We've decided our low-hanging fruit, well, I don't know if it's low-hanging, but it's a priority. It's probably not low-hanging at all, now that I say that, is vocations. So working with our international vocation team, because while in the US our sisters are aging out, our other areas are growing. So how do I take this global base, and start getting them to move in a cohesive manner? And what can we revamp on our vocation site? And then it's good because now we'll have more thought about what specific metrics we want. So it's really been helpful. I just want to say I appreciate it. And I hope this group continues as we work on things, because there's struggle, right? Or I don't know how everyone feels, but the struggle is real.
And that's a good idea, Donna. But we didn't talk much about benchmarking, but when you do benchmark like that, sometimes it is a number you're grabbing because you're not quite sure, or you're Googling something or looking at other people's analytics and they're telling you. And sometimes those are marketers selling a product, so it doesn't really compare apples to apples, But if you benchmark it yourself and say, we want to reach this, and you're going over it, maybe that's time to increase that ceiling or to increase that benchmark. So that's a great idea that Donna's talking about there, because it's not like there's a lot of research out there for ribbon religious in terms of what works, what doesn't work, especially if you have an international audience. You can look at your Google Analytics and things on your websites, but that's a whole nother application that you're talking about.
Thank you. It's just been really helpful to go through this process with everyone.
Can't believe you're all this quiet. You all are doing great work. Elizabeth, I think I see your hand up.
Unmute now. I think that one of the things that struck me was you were very clear about if something doesn't work, change it, go there. Sometimes I feel that we want something to work and we're slow. I think this is a good idea and I'm very slow to let go of the idea. So that really struck me. I think I heard you say that a few times. Drop it if it doesn't work, really. And I think that's sometimes where we fall down, because we have a notion sometimes about what should work and it's not working, and we kind of hold on to our notion. So that was very clear to me in what you were saying. It's just a comment.
And sometimes you have to do those sacred cows,
Yes.
that you're going to do no matter what, that you can't let go of for whatever reason. But yes, it's very difficult. Some of us get entrenched in that, well, we know it works. We know if we do it long enough, it will work. But sometimes it's better to retool it or pick a different idea or to drop it. Now, that doesn't mean the sacred cows can't stay, because you don't have an option sometimes.
Yeah.
And you have to keep those things.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Lori.
I love hearing everyone's take and questions, and want to build on those. But I thank you, Alice, for putting the theoretical behind it, and I'm glad we're highlighting the piece about the evaluation and as part of the strategic plan, just like what Elizabeth just said. Sometimes you have to know when to let go, and how are you going to know without that data? So my question is, okay, if you gather all the data, you're knowing then, I guess it's kind of what other people were saying, knowing when to make the decisions, to draw the conclusions. And I think you had said you need enough data to draw conclusions, but kind of pulling it all together. So if you have analytics from social media, you have analytics from the website, you might have some data from in-person activities, but knowing how to pull it all together and keeping track of those KPIs, the key performance indicators, knowing what those are. Okay, what are those? Is it, and in ministry, any kind of ministry, it's not necessarily numbers. It's more qualitative, but it needs to be more than just a feeling like, oh, that went really well. The sisters will say, that went really well. We had one person. Yay. And that's good, because if that was a connection that was made, that was a relationship that was established and will be going forward, then yes, it is a yay. But then that doesn't always translate to on paper well and with numbers. So
that's a great, Lori, that's a very smart tactic, because what happens is you have the attendees that may be coming, and then maybe the return on investment that you're getting, but then there's that other aspect, the people you're reaching, and are those the people you want to reach, and are they meeting a certain target audience for you and segment for you? And the sisters want to hang on to that. That's like a fine line you walk, especially in ministry work. So it's a matter of, when you set those goals and strategies and objectives, maybe you can get them to think, to be successful, what would that look like for that particular goal? Is that having 25 people at something that's attended rather than one? Or is that getting this much income? Or is that getting some grant funder to sponsor it? Or what are the outcomes that everybody wants to see? That's a great point you bring up, Lori. And we walk that line with ministries. We really do. So it's a little bit different. It's not just pure black and white. You have these gray areas. and those areas that you have to walk. But that's between you and what you're doing in your department and with your leadership team and your ministries that you're working with to try to determine what your goals are so you can make an informed decision if you do need to let something go or to bring something new in. Maybe there's spikes for certain things you're seeing. And you're like, wow, let's do more of that, you know? We don't need to do this, but let's do more of this. So Lori, that's a great point you're making.
And I have to say that, the sisters are always so affirming, and they're always optimistic and looking at the, what's going well. But sometimes to come up with this data that says, well, maybe we do need to let go of that and go a different direction. How about that? So it is a balancing act for sure. Are you, in terms of like formatting different data that's collected, any thoughts on that? I know it's any samples, or anybody else have samples?
I'll tell you what we like right now are infographics because they tell a story very quickly, especially if you're dealing with people that don't like numbers. We laugh, we tease our sisters. You got into this ministry because you wanted to be a grants writer, right? And so it's hard to digest these things. So infographics with pictures seems to work really well, especially for those of us that don't like that stuff. I don't know what's worked for other people. What's worked for everybody else? Any other way you have to show folks your data?
I definitely try to keep things big picture. I don't know that I do like big reports to our general administration or general counsel because you can see their eyes just kind of glaze over halfway through anything. But I might take it by initiative, like we revamped our internal newsletter. And so after a number of months, I compared the data and our open rates, for that. And then that's something they can digest, just simplistically. Or we, along with doing that, we launched kind of a new quasi newsletter, which is for other members of our Holy Cross family and associates and staff. So kind of that, not sister membership, but another internal audience. And so again, teaching them how, or not teaching, but well, I guess we are, talking about how we're expanding our audiences, keeping those relationships with stakeholders, and then giving them the numbers of how many people are signing up and what that open rate is. And that's information that I feel like they can digest. But I love your idea of putting that into an infographic that then they could keep, because sometimes, a week later, 2 weeks later, I'm talking with one of them and I said, no, remember now, there's this thing, So I think I'll use that example. I can do that, but small bits I find work better for them. None of them want to be experts in grant writers or communications, I don't think. Which is okay, it's what I like.
Any other thoughts? What ideas are you having as you're hearing these things from others? Anybody having an idea they want to try, or an obstacle that might stand in your way because you have an idea that you might want to try?
We're a quiet group today.
Well, I was going to say I liked the idea of presenting the ROI to my leadership because, like a lot of us, we were just talking about with the numbers, they don't really want a whole lot of numbers thrown at them. But if I could just pull out a few of these bullet points of yours and show that to them when we do a mailing, I think that will go a long way, because they just, my leadership, they just tend to want to kind of hear the good news. And so I think, using this kind of algorithm will be very helpful for me the next time we do a mailing, to show them what worked.
Yeah, the return on investment thing is really big for print, especially with mailing costs. Man, they just raised it again, So I'm not saying, once again, that's not an investment you don't make, because sometimes you do have to make that investment. You still have to connect with people. But on the other hand, maybe there's a different way to do it after you look at your return on investments for those. Maybe it's more postcard based versus a thicker publication. So there's a variety of then decisions you can make based upon what you're seeing for your return. And maybe there's certain, and maybe there's certain stories, Kathy, like you ran and people really responded to the stories, because it's all about telling the story to get folks interested in you.
I'm just going to read out Stephanie's note in the chat because her equipment is on the fritz. Her obstacle is that she works under the Director of Communications, so she doesn't have access to all the analytics, which makes things a little more difficult, but she's learning mountains during this course. And another note is that she's a huge fan of using infographics and colorful graphics.
Sometimes it's, everyone's so busy and you're all so small, short-staffed, basically. You want to do a lot, but you don't have the staff to do it. If you wanted maybe Stephanie to go after that data, or to ask if you could parse some of that data or to look at it, maybe that would help, just because people are so overwhelmed in day-to-day activities, they're not even thinking about it. That happens here, with what we're doing. There's certain things we'd love to do, but it may take us a while to get there because there's so many other things happening. Carly?
Okay, thanks. Let me see how to lower my hand. Okay. First off, this is something that I really wanted to know more about. So I'm still kind of trying to process it, because we haven't really talked much. I've been with the sisters here at our monastery in Fort Smith. They're these wonderful Benedictine sisters that I've just grown up with through Catholic schools. And but I've only been with them about a year. I was hired during a spike in the pandemic. I've been remote. There was no real onboarding process. And I'm finding that there are a lot of organizational tools that we just haven't had in place, or were lost during the time when they had their other director and I came in. So this, first off, this course has been so helpful for me. But then also, I know relatively nothing about the analytics that we've used in the past, or how to move forward. So for me, this is like a springing board to see where I need to be and see where I need to be going. And I work kind of under Sister Elise, our development director, and I think she must have access to all these numbers, or a lot of the numbers that we're looking at. So I'm seeing that Sister Elise and I need to talk more about the relationship between what we're doing and the numbers she's seeing in terms of donations. So for me, this is just a lot of beginning process. So thank you. It's been really helpful.
Yeah, and sometimes it's good. You're starting with a clean slate, blank slate, Carly. You can start all over and just do what you want. Reinvent the wheel any way you'd like to. So that's a good thing. Kathy.
I was just going to say, also, Carly, sometimes what happens is there really weren't any good processes before you came on board, which is what I have found. So you may be having to, create your own.
Thank you for that. I think that things worked a certain way the first 20 years, and I'm privileged to know, like, our older development director who was there forever, writing lots of stories for our diocesan newspaper and press releases and stuff. And I feel like I've come in and it's a lot more social media and that sort of thing now. And so I think that there's like a lag maybe between how those things operate. So thank you, that encouragement's really helpful.
Yeah.
But you have new audiences. That's great. Don't forget your new audiences in your communications plan. The new audiences you want to reach, and how will you measure if you're doing well reaching those audiences?
We have about 2 minutes left, so it doesn't look like there's a ton of burning questions. So I'm gonna thank Alice for your expertise and time today, and we'll be welcoming you back for our next session, which I just want to point out the recording for the next session is already available. So if you wanted to watch it in the near future to continue on, that one is about qualitative, moving on from the quantitative in Thinkific, and it will be also Alice back for our next class. So if you have questions, don't make her pull teeth. Bring your ideas and your stories along. We're all communicators. We all like to talk at least a little bit. So the other thing I just wanted to draw your attention to is, don't forget you have that community space in Thinkific. So if you wanted to utilize that to chat amongst yourselves, feel free to do that. So like if you've got a great infographic and you want to share it, or you're looking for other infographics, you can do that in Thinkific. Or if you're looking for something that, maybe the Thinkific site's not your favorite, we do have the listserv. You can always appeal to the listserv, or in the Discord server. We've got a lot of chatter that happens in Discord as well. So lots of places, even outside of this group, to get some of those processes that may not be in existence in your office yet. So with that said, if Laudato Si is one of the communication initiatives that your particular congregation is going forward on, Season of Creation is coming up, and we all have Laudato Si Action Platform that may or may not be part of your wheelhouse. So we do have the folks from the Laudato Si movement are coming to speak during this week's CWR Academy. So that is on Wednesday. Still have time to sign up, and the session link is in the chat from Brian. So if you want to sign up that way, you can. It's also a great one for your justice promoters. So if you work regularly or don't work regularly with your justice promoter, this is a great one to share to create that cross communication between departments if you have a separate person for justice promotion. And then the last thing I wanted to just put out there is, if you are going to the CWR conference in October, big shout out to our very own Lori Lindauer, who's the conference chair. If you're going to the conference and would like to, or would be willing to, give a little bit of a testimonial about your experience, we would love to have your be recruiting for next year's certificate class, but both getting your feedback directly to us, but then also helping us just let folks at the conference know. Or if you want to get together in person, there's usually a lunchtime when folks have the opportunity to gather with like-minded folks, or in the evenings after sessions, if you want to get together and meet one another in person, that's a great time to do it. So if you haven't registered, now's the time. Get all those tickets and things in place. Anything, support Lori's work. She did a lot of work. Come and learn about it. Anybody have anything else before we head out for the day? All right. Thanks again, Alice, and we look forward to seeing you all again next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.